Great. Welcome everyone to day 2 of iAdmin. We are so excited to have you with us, and we've got some great sessions lined up for today. To answer a couple FAQs, the recordings for all sessions are available on this webpage in the agenda below immediately following the sessions. Slides for all presentations will also be available after the event. We just ask that you complete our post-event survey that will be sent out via email tomorrow, so look out for that. We're ending the day today with a live Q&A with all of the iAdmin speakers. We'll bring any unanswered questions from all of the sessions, so be sure to attend that and bring any last questions there. Without further ado, I would like to welcome you to our first session of the day, Rapid Fire Admin with Steve Pitcher. Steve is a sales consultant and security engineer here at Service Express and very widely known in the industry. If you have questions for Steve throughout the session, please put them in the Q&A tab on the right, and we'll go through as many as we can at the end of the session. Like I said, if we don't get to your question, we will add it to our list for the live Q&A at the end of the day today. For any other comments, please use the chat function on the right. And with that, I will hand it off to Steve.
Thank you, Brooke. Hey, everybody. So I'll do my best to look at the question panel. We're going to do about an hour and a half of straight tips here, and we'll see what we can do. Okay, if I spot it and I can answer it real quick, I'll do it. If not, I usually go right to the end. And so we'll, like Brooke said, move everything to the Q&A after the fact. So this is Rapid Fire Admin. Also known as the session that's incredibly difficult to do for somebody at 8:30 in the morning. As about 150 tips over an hour and a half period, and I tend to talk at a fairly high rate of speed throughout. So, and I'm also, forgive me, recovering from a pretty bad cold. So we'll keep moving through here as best we can, and I'll try to minimize my stops for water and coffee and everything like that. Anyways, the target for this is mostly IBM administrators. However, anybody who works on the IBM I, whether you're a developer or a manager or what have you, I'm sure you'll pick up more than a couple that could be useful to you going forward. So let's start with a couple of ones for 7.6. Multi-factor authentication, of course, is brand new natively with the operating system, or it comes delivered with the operating system at 7.6. Requires, of course, Q security level 40 and password level 4. And, it's a great new feature. And we had a kind of a conversation about this yesterday as part of the security networking room. And, somebody had mentioned, well, what's the difference between this and an ISV piece of software? Well, the cool thing about the IBM version is that it accepts all three factors at the same time. Whereas if you use another ISV product, because it's not baked into the operating system, you are providing the first two factors and then the third after the fact. So I would argue this is probably a little bit stronger. May not be as pretty, but it does work very, very well for your MFA needs. Another thing at 7.6, config host servers. Like, you want to be able to ensure that all of your host servers are set up with a secure connection. So what do I mean by host servers? I mean, your database server, your print server, telnet, so on and so forth. So if you do a star host server, star all, that's what I'm talking about when we're talking about doing a host server. So you can have more control right off the bat with these things. Another cool feature at 7.6 is dynamic link aggregation. What the hell is that? Well, link aggregation is when you can take, two or more network ports, Ethernet ports, and kind of consolidate them into one virtual IP spread across, physical hardware. So what's really neat about that is that you do a couple of things. You get an incredible amount of throughput, because if you have one Ethernet port and it's going at 1 gigabit per second, okay, that's all you got. When you push that over 4 Ethernet ports, well, then you have 4 gigabit in terms of bandwidth. And I like that a lot. The cool thing that happened at 7.6 is that now you can add and remove those particular Ethernet ports dynamically. You used to have to vary the thing off, add, CMN07, CMN08. start it back up again, and then it'll work. Now you can do that on the fly, which is pretty slick. We're going to do some talking about SQL. Okay. Now, over the years, there's been some advents with DB2 for I services or IBM I services, and since 7.1, if I remember correctly. So, what we try to do here is provide you with a number of things that you can take and then start using in your shops right away. Handy things that I tend to use on a relatively regular basis. I think you'd probably enjoy them as well. Um, Little things like this one. Okay. We're going to check and see what net server jobs use what shares. If you're interested in understanding, hey, who uses this darn share? I don't know if anybody does. Um, you can throw on this, of course, you have to have, your authority collection turned on for objects, of course. But what we're doing here is we're determining what jobs are actually hitting directories by way of the QZLS file or QZLS file T job. Those are your net server client jobs. And I'm seeing if, the path name is slash root. Maybe you have a root directory share. You shouldn't. Maybe you do. This is how you can determine who's using what. And then you can go over to them and, you know, crack their knuckles with a ruler or what have you, talk to the user, understand what they're doing, and then give them an appropriate share to somewhere that's not that dangerous, something off the root directory. Um, I like this one here. When we have customers that say, hey, I have a performance problem, my system's real slow. One of the first things we check is the amount of white space that's in their database tables. And when we mention white space and reorg physical file member, um, everybody says, "Oh, we do reorgs on a regular basis." No, you don't. Okay, you might have a job that does some reorgs, and those reorgs are probably reorging the same 10, 20, 30 tables for the last 25 years. There's a lot more on the system that has white space. What we try to do is eliminate the amount of white space on the system. If you eliminate your white space, you make every single transaction over that particular table go faster. This particular little script, yes, it's ugly as sin. It works very well. So we run this on a customer system. It spits out a listing of tables or physical files in order of how much white space you can glean back. We've pulled back terabytes of garbage that are sitting on disk, going to tape every single night, replicated with mimics or what have you. When you get your list and you start reorganizing these things and you're squashing your tables down to something that's a little bit more disk friendly and performance friendly, you're going to see nothing but positivity happening. Okay. So have a look at that, run it at your leisure. One of these things is kind of cool. User profiles that can be hijacked. Well, what does that mean? Well, if you were to contract somebody to do a penetration test for you, okay, one of the things they're going to try to do as part of a white box test is to see if they can elevate their own authority. This is a really old hack. It's a really effective hack. It's not a hack. It's just taking advantage of misconfiguration of the system. So what's it do? Well, let's say I'm on a system and I'm a regular Joe user. I have no authority to do anything really of power. If I am able to use run SQL scripts and just do a select splat from QSys to user info, and I see somebody other than myself or three very basic IBM profiles, if I see somebody else in there, well, that means that I have authority to that user profile object, either star all, star use, star change. It doesn't matter which one. Okay. Any of them means that I can use that user profile. And if that user profile has a special authority, then I have that special authority by way of, submitting a job underneath that user that I can use. It's kind of cute. This particular script will tell you um, any user profile on the system that is not set appropriately, which is, what's a user profile object appropriate authority? It's star public, star exclude, period. Anything else, it can be hijacked. And this script is going to tell you how to find those. Um, Listing tables used since the last save. When we're looking at this sort of thing, it's kind of neat to say, hey, is there anything here? I want to know exactly what's changed since my last time I backed it up. Okay. And you can riff on this a lot. I've got a couple of examples. Um, Maybe out of order here. In here, I have a couple of examples to determine, hey, what's changed since the last save? What has never been backed up? Am I having this particular library or this particular set of objects on my nightly save? If it shows that it's changed but hasn't been backed up again, um, or since the last system save, that's really important to ensure that you have those things covered off. Hang on a sec. Does that user profile script also apply to group profiles? Uh, yes. Yes, it does. I'll move over. If I look at authority collection here, and I want to see a couple of things, like authority collection showed up in 7.3. And if you want to determine how your system is being used, authority collection is going to trap every single time an object is touched. Who did it? How did they do it? What special authority did they invoke? Did they get it from a group profile? Did they get it from an authorization list, and so on and so forth? Um, did they get it through adopted authority? You can use scripts like this to determine if something's been used in a way or in a manner that you are not prepared for. Okay, so this one says, hey, show me a list of objects that have been accessed by adopted authority. Somebody elevated their authority by calling a program, adopting the ownership of the owner, and then, touching a particular object. Um, it's kind of cute. All right. Same thing here. If I want to look for objects accessed by all object special authority. All right, it's the same difference, except a different method. So if you want to find out the how, then you can start asking about the why, which is often the most important thing. However, the how is very interesting. The how is something you want to shut down if you can. Couple of things here: finding PTFs that are loaded but not applied. I like that. I need to know what stuff is kind of ready to go before the next IPL. So if I'm going to reboot a system that hasn't been rebooted in 4 years, what's going to happen on that reboot? Will anything change? Maybe. Does somebody have 60,000 PTFs ready to apply in the next IPL and just forgot about it? Maybe. It does happen. This is going to tell you here. This is your PTF info view. PTF group currency. This one's an old one, but it's still pretty slick. Okay. If I want to determine, what my PTF levels are, you're going to say, well, just do a work PTF group. Who cares? Well, this one's kind of cute because you can check your work PTF group and this will cross reference with IBM against what they have. So if you're on Java group X and IBM is on Java group X plus 15, well, you're back a ways. It gives you context. If I want to look at users with default passwords, what's a default password? Well, I guess it's not a default password anymore, but in terms of historical naming, it is. So previous to 7.5, if you had a user profile, you do a create user profile. The default password was set to star user profile. So, create user profile, B Smith, your password's going to automatically be Smith unless you change that. IBM has changed that at 7.5 and 7.6 moving forward. So that's cool. However, it doesn't mean those things don't exist out there. I can guarantee if you're on 7.6, you may just have a couple of user profiles because they've been migrated from older releases. So, sure, you can do an analyze default password command. It's going to give you everything you want. Almost. Okay. What I like to do is riff on this stuff, especially if you got, a lot of user profiles on the system that have default passwords. So if I can determine how many of those user profiles have all object special authority? All right. Any of them enabled versus disabled? Anybody have a default password but has never signed on? Well, that's an easy one to take care of because if it's never signed on, you've never used it to authenticate to the system, kill it. Okay. Or just change the password on it because if it's never logged on, it's not going to matter anyways. You're not going to break a process. Um, This gives you a little bit of extra context when you're making decisions on what to do. Now, if you only have 3, all right, it's not the end of the world. However, if you've got 30, you are going to take a couple of hours probably just to figure out, okay, what happens when I change the password on this? That's a question everybody's going to ask. This is going to give you a little bit of insight, right? You can determine a lot of insight from this information. Um, Cleanup, detaching spool files from jobs. Well, that's my favorite thing in the world to do. Not really, but it is a favorite thing on IBMI. So when you have a job and that job ends, a spool file will exist, okay, as part of that job, even though the job is um, ended. Okay, the job is still active in the job table because those spool files are attached to it. So the job is ended, but it's still there. One thing you can do is detach your spool files from jobs. That means that the job will actually officially end, and your job table is reduced by one. Okay, that's all well and good. Um, Issue that people will find sometimes, or every time, but they might not notice it until they go to look for it, is that because the association is gone, right? You've detached it. Well, that means that if I do a work job and I go and try to find the spool files for the job, it's not going to find it. Okay, so what? You can do a work job log. You can go to Navigator. You can go to your spooled output for ACS or what have you. It's not the 1988 anymore. We don't need to go and do a work job. We can find spool files in many, many other ways. Um, Very easy. Damaged objects. When do you find damaged objects? It's when you're doing save 21 because every object is touched. Okay, so this showed up a few years ago, where you can actually run a damaged object detection in advance before you have to do a system save. Because if you run to damaged object on a save, what's it going to do? Well, it's going to blow your save, right? Your save's going to go, and you're going to have to figure out, oh shoot, how do I repair this damaged object so I can rerun my save? Don't wait for your save. You can run this particular command. It will review all objects on the system to determine if any of them are damaged. Then you can appropriately do your save. I like riffing on old commands. Okay, so um, if I say to a customer, "Well, how many users do you have on your system right now?" What does everybody do? Everybody does a work active job. They'll page down to queue enter, and they'll start counting them up manually. Okay, page down, page down, page down. If you do a display status assistance level basic, it'll show you how many signed on users interactively you have there. Um, that's cute. If you wanted to be fancy and do a little bit of SQL, you can determine your active interactive users right here with this particular script, my job info table telling me exactly how many users with how many interactive users show up on there. ACS, this is, it's worthwhile to keep mentioning this. People who are looking at this presentation will probably be saying, who cares about ACS? Everybody knows that ACS is IBM's strategic direction for client software, and it's a Java-based client, and there's no installation, and you can do all sorts of cool stuff with it. Yeah, and not everybody uses it still. Okay, if I was to pick on the last 4 or 5 customers that I worked with on their systems, um, I can tell you probably 3 out of 5 may have ACS downloaded for their console, but they don't have ACS downloaded for themselves or their users. They are still using old client software, iSeries Access for Windows 6.1 or something like that that hasn't seen a fix back in 15 years. Very important to get ACS downloaded for all of your users and move forward from there. Cool things in here, Control C and Control V work out of the gate. If you want to do some documentation, you can keep track of your screen history every time you hit a function key, an enter key. It will capture these screens and you can mark that stuff up. If you want to embed OpenJDK instead of Oracle Java, you can do that. Here are the instructions. It's very simple. You can embed that within the ACS image and then get that to your users versus having to install Oracle's Java on everybody's PC and laptop. Navigator as well. This is not Navigator from IBM i61, right? It's not your Navigator from IBM i7 III. Um, when we had the um, oh shoot, I can't remember the name of the bug from maybe 2021 or 2022. Actually, it was a little bit before that, I think. Um, it'll come back to me. It's a massive bug, and hey Steve, it's only the biggest hole in computing history in the last 20 years. What was it? I can't remember the name of the darn bug. Somebody remember, they stick it in the chat for me. But around that time when everybody was trying to get that particular code out of their systems, um, it was found that Navigator was full of it. So IBM literally full of that bug. So IBM reimagined Navigator and put it forth so it actually performs very well now compared to the older instances of Navigator. So this is a reimagining of Navigator. Um, your global fast search, that's still there. I would challenge anybody who says, well, IBM administration is hard to do because, people don't know the nomenclature. The work disk status will be WRK, DSK, STS. You take your three words and you kind of take the vowels out or whatever, and you make it into an actual command. Well, let's just use English, or whatever language your system is in. If your system is in French, and we'll follow the French words for disk. I have no idea what that is, but if I'm looking for the ability to manage a system, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to kick out regular words, and it's going to bring me to disk information. Log4j. Thank you, Dave. Um, that's the bug that was, Navigator was full of. Not Meltdown Inspector. No, no, no. Okay. So it wasn't as bad as Meltdown Inspector, but it was pretty darn bad because it was everywhere. Okay. Navigator was full of it, and they reimagined it. Favorites, any screen in Navigator. If you want to bookmark for later, you can do that very easily, especially if you have some fairly deep directories on the IFS. If you want to bookmark something that's 30 levels deep, yeah, sure, no problem. That way you don't have to drill down all the way down. If you want to favorite your, work disk status, or favorite your user profiles, or favorite whatever, you can collect your favorites there and your most often used um, areas in Navigator to go to. Keep track of it. It's going to do that for you. Filters are going to be on every single table. Um, Network IP descriptions. This is something that I've railed um, on for 15 years. I'm a big fan of taking your IP addresses and putting a description on them. If you've got 22 IP addresses on your system, and I'm looking at it for the first time, and there's nothing documented on there, and I say, okay, well, how does everything work here? And then I'm relying on a human being to tell me, oh, we think that, 10.10.1.44 is this, and 48 is this, and, so on and so forth. It's real difficult. Describe them, put in the text description of where it is, and it's going to show up on your screen for IP addresses. Very simple to find. Updating WebSphere. Anybody here updates WebSphere for a living? It's really sad when you have to go into Shell and do it manually. It's way easier to do in Navigator, or specifically the IBM HTTP admin. I've never, in say the last 10, 12 years, seen a WebSphere instance upgrade or fixpack bomb when you do it the Navigator way. What does bomb? Mistakes in Shell. When you're putting this big long script together to fire off and to update your WebSphere, yeah, you're going to make mistakes. You're a human being. I do it all the time. But when we go into Navigator and do it from here, you're literally saying, I want to upgrade this instance, pointing at this version, let it rip. It just works. Works well. I skipped the screen here. Spool files. I still have people saying, I'd love to be able to get my spool files in PDF. How do I do that? TS1, Transform Services. It's a free product. You load it up on your system, restore license program, put it on there, and then you can transform your text into PDF on the fly with ACS or Navigator, or heck, man, you can, do it with an API and just let it rip on your system. Storage and service tools. Um, yeah, you don't need to do it. You can do it through Navigator if you want to. I don't always advise you do that. As long as you have a SST user and your user, they have to match. And then once you have matching credentials in service tools and in, I guess, your IBM I environment, then yeah, you can do some disk work. But of course, only press the red button if you know what the red button does, because you can also remove disk in there. So be careful when you make your decisions. This is a cute one, and I'm really surprised this isn't baked into the OS yet. It should be. I would probably, I'll keep, recommending IBM do that. But they had a product called Go Nets, which is your green screen net server management menu. Now, Steve, you just talked about Navigator and all a couple of cool things in Navigator you can do. Why are you telling me about a green screen command that's not even a stock green screen command? You got to download it. Well, if you have an issue with NetServer, let's just say, for instance, you have a massive ransomware attack or malware attack, your system is partially hosed and you don't want to have it turned on. You're on the system in a restricted state, wondering, how am I going to fix this? Where did the problem happen? Where are my holes? Well, if you know that your system was partially hosed and you're now in a restricted state, well, you're not going to fire up Navigator and look for your file shares. You want a green screen option to do that. GoNets is a very handy utility. A lot of people have it. Not everybody has it. Everybody should have it. So you can do a GoNets, take an option to look at my file shares, and then you see, I've got 16 shares. Here are the directories that somebody has potentially exploited. Here's where I have to look first for my evidence and for checking for damage, which are sometimes and often the same thing. It's cute. Now, you can also, if you want to do, go nets, you can do things like re-enable your disable accounts and things like that. You could also go into here to Navigator and bookmark, re-enable disable net server accounts. And it's a favorite for me, always. SMB, get off 7172. You're saying, well, Steve, we're on 7.5. Like, we don't even think about 7.1, 7.2. Yeah, there's people that do. I can guarantee you there's people on this call right now on 7.1, 7.2, and 7.3. 100%. They're a minority, but it's very important to do so. However, the older versions of NetServer on those older releases, it's just ancient. You have to get off to move. Line descriptions. This is a favorite one of mine. I found something less than 3-4 months ago where a customer was complaining about slow network speed. It's like, I can't get this, SSH transaction to push, data over across the wire at a reasonable clip. What the heck is going on? And it's one of those things where instinct, where you're like, check your line descriptions. And yeah, sure, 10 meg half duplex is not going to run faster than 1 gigabit full duplex. It just ain't. But what happens is, way back in the day, somebody created a line description and it's never been updated. You migrate from system to system to system to system. You have the old line description. It's never been changed. It's always been set at whatever the line speed was for whatever physical hardware you were plugging into, in 2003. Check those things and you may be interested in what you find. DB2 symmetric multiprocessing. This is one of my favorite features. It has been for a long time. I'll explain the concept. We have some time here. It's only half an hour into it, and I'm running low on coffee, so I'm going to get a refill here, and we're going to chat about DB2 SMP. So, back in the day, if you had a multi-way machine, let's just say you had a system with more than one processor core. In 1998, you probably had $1 million box. Very powerful, very expensive for back then. So what IBM did way back when was allow you to use more than one core at a time for a particular task on the system. If you submit any task to the system, no matter if it's 1998 or 2026, if you have no SMP enabled, that particular task will be attacked by one core, period. I don't care if you got 16 active on your LPAR, one core is going to attack that particular one task. So rewind back to whenever they put this in, V3R7 or something like that. So they put that in back there, and because they put it in back there, it was a chargeable feature. Most people don't have it nowadays. As of 2022, IBM decided to make this a free option as part of the OS. So you can load it up and put it on your system here now. What does it do? Well, when you have SMP enabled, all of your cores on your LPAR will simultaneously attack a particular task. So your throughput goes through the darn roof, potentially. Okay, so every system's different. I will, preface that with your mileage may vary. Right here is a particular system that was idling around 55% during the day, and at night when you had your big honking nighttime jobs run, the system would go up to 85, 95% of the processors, 3 or 4 cores on this system if I remember correctly. After enabling SMP and setting system value Q query degree to star optimize, they then idled their CPU or their CPUs at about 20 to 25%, and at nighttime, um, it would balloon up to say 50 or 55% for the nighttime jobs. Much more effective processor utilization. So instead of saying, "Hey, Steve, I need another core of IBMI," and I'm going to say, "Yeah, sure, we can do that, and it's not cheap, but I'll sell it to you. Sure, not a problem." I would much rather say, "Hey, why don't you go and see if you have SMP enabled? You've got 3 cores, 4 cores, 5 cores, no SMP. Well, we can just turn the thing on." And you can see if you get any value. You can do it by job. You can do it at the system level. There's a whole bunch of ways you can do SMP. You don't have to turn it on for everything all at once. But if you turn it on and you get some more value, you can then delay future core license purchases, like versions of IBMI, and the SWAMA that comes along. It's a very expensive thing to do on a P10 and above system. So if you can turn on SMP, and maybe you don't have to make another purchase for IBMI licensing going forward, I think that's more value for the customer. So check it out if you don't have it. If you do have it installed, play with it and see what you get. SMT, I'm not even going to talk about SMT. Basically, it's just an encouragement. Get to Power 10, Power 11 using recent versions of the OS. If you're on older versions of the OS, SMT is going to be, oh shoot, I'll talk about it. Like back on Power 8 and higher, S71 goes to SMT4, 72, 73, 74, 75, and 76 all go to SMT8. So keep your assets current is the tip there. All right. NVMe adapters. That's pretty much the standard here now. Richie Palma did a great session yesterday on some storage. So we're talking about internal storage. NVMe is the way we go. If you're on an older machine, we just moved a customer from a Power 8 to a Power 11, a pair of Power 8s to a pair of Power 11s actually, and went from a mix of spinning and SSDs to flash core modules on IBM external storage. And the thing is just blazing fast now. It's so much better. So if you're stuck on an older release on older iron and you're wondering, well, shoot, am I going to get value when I move? Yeah, you're going to get value, all right, especially when you go to external storage. ARE, that's another thing. It's free charge. Load it up, play with it. You want to check your JVM before an upgrade, things like that. When we do upgrades, people say, "Well, I'm not running Java." Everybody runs Java. You just might not know about it. You do a work JVM job, you're going to tell what JVMs you have there. You could also do a JVM info IBM I service, select splat from QSys2 JVM underscore info and determine what JVM jobs you have. Temp, not often, but it does happen, where people will call and say, "Hey, I just blew away slash TMP, and now everything doesn't really work as what we thought it was going to work." Slash TMP is not a directory that you put garbage in. It's not Qtemp, right? Slash TMP is regrettably a place where ISVs put a lot of their production objects. So they'll stick stuff in slash TMP that may be temporary to them. It's not a temporary directory. The objects live in there until you delete them. So if they have something important in there, and you blow it away and it goes to reference that object later, it's not going to work. So just be careful on what you delete and when you delete them, and make sure you have a backup before you do either. My voice is actually holding up. I'm really surprised because I'm like day 7 or day 8 of this cold. And so I'm really impressed. I'm staying relatively vocal here. Um, Index Advisor. This is a cute little piece of kit that's been actually enhanced with 7.6. But just as the basics of Index Advisor, what is it? Well, you get to it from ACS. And what's this? What is Advisor first and foremost? Every time you run a data access routine, I don't care if it's an RPG program or an SQL script or open query file or whatever. If a temporary index needs to be built, the system is going to build that, and it's going to keep track of that for you. So if you put um, a select statement into an embedded select statement into an RPG program, and you run that thing, every time that thing runs, it's going to create a temporary index, keep track of it, and tell you how long it takes, how long the index creation takes, so on and so forth. So that when you go and look and say, "Hey, I'm seeing performance issues. What's Index Advisor telling me? Does it make more sense if I took this particular index? Let's just say it says, "Hey, you've called this 40,000 times in the last 2 weeks." Okay. And every time we call it, it takes 32 seconds to build a temporary index because the tables you're putting this over are massive. Okay, great. Maybe it makes sense to build a permanent index. And if you wanted to do that, you can right click, you know, the index advice and say, create index. And it's going to build it exactly how the darn thing runs in the background. There's no guessing. Um, you can do it. Now, you don't want to do it for every single index advice that you get or every piece of index advice that you get. It's kind of an art. It's kind of like, a little bit like barbecue. It's not baking. You're going to have to look at the system and say, well, how much value am I going to get back from doing this index, this permanent index? Let's just say it's running over files, and I've got there's 2 files that's going over, and there's a combined 40 million records, and you know table size is maybe I don't know, maybe a 50 gig. And there's a couple of things that you look at. You look at the overall breadth of the situation. If you've got an index advice that's happening every single day, 50 times a day, and it's going over a table with 2 records, who cares? Big deal. If it's going over a table with 40 million records and it's costing you time to build a temporary index every single time you do it, um, yeah, it makes sense to put a permanent index over it. So you kind of have to go in there and take a look within the context of the entire system. Pick your top 15 or 20 potential candidates for creating permanent indexes, and just to see if those applications start performing a little bit better. Um, Temporary storage usage. We see this from time to time where customers have, a huge amount of temporary storage. You want to come in and find some information about it. There's a great service called SysTMP Sys Temporary Storage, and you can determine what jobs and how big the darn buckets are for your temp storage. And then, if you have an issue with something that's run away and it's growing, it's growing and growing, you can find this information out from here. I moved ahead, but it didn't move. Huh. I have a slide here. I think it's might be hidden when I click on it. It's about auditing your printing. Now, yes, it's 2026. Um, I think okay, somebody's moving the thing behind the scenes. Leave it alone, please. When we look at printing, all right, and this buy paper cut is kind of paper cut is one of those products out there that I don't give product pitches, but this is too cheap to really care about. It might be $100 or something. They might have a free version on it. But before I get to that, I want to talk about auditing your printing. So in 2026, you may still have big honking printers spitting out hundreds of pages of, effectively garbage that people keep, put in storage and whatnot. If you want to determine how much printing is costing your organization from IBMI, you can capture that information in your audit journal. Determine what jobs, and when you have the job, you also have the user, and you can determine what users are costing your company money by sending output to a physical printer nowadays. Papercut does the darn same thing, except from a Windows perspective. So both of those tips in conjunction with each other can save you some money. Um, you know, way back in the day, in the maybe 2015 or so, I was doing this with one of the companies I was working for, and we determined we were spending, roughly speaking, $400,000 a year on printing. Um, old IBM Green Bar printers, they would just pump this stuff out, and the money we were spending on toner and ink and maintenance and everything else. Um, it's like, hey, we're trying to save some money here. Maybe you want to convert that to a PDF. We can do that now with Transform Services. Or we can maybe put a workflow in place where you attach a PDF file to an application and you can do a digital sign off versus, rolling through, 200 pages of green bar and signing your, if you're the CFO, signing your name at the bottom of the thing. Um, there's less expensive ways to get where you want to go. So, okay. I see a couple of there we go. Um, delete PTF. We have some enhanced special values here. So if you want to blow away um, collections of PTFs, like you want to delete all, PTF cover letters, sure, you can do that. If you want to blow away PTFs that are in save file only status, you can do that. So, riff on delete PTF command for you. PTF group catch-alls. Oh, I didn't add the one for 7.6. You get the point. 7.6 is going to be 7.6.1 at the end here. What is a PTF group catch-all? Well, it's going to download everything, almost everything. Okay. Um, for whatever version you're on, whether you have deleted or installed or not. So if you have WebSphere MQ, you have WebSphere application server. Um, Maybe you don't have those products. It's going to bring down the PTF groups for those products, no matter what you have. So ideally, don't use it. Okay, it's a terrible thing to order because it's going to confuse somebody on the system who's trying to update PTFs, or maybe they're not even trying to update PTFs. Maybe they're looking at your system to understand how the system works, and they see PTFs loaded and applied for applications that don't even live on the darn system. So it's like, oh, I see PTFs for MQ. Well, we don't have MQ. Well, you've got PTFs loaded for it and applied for it. Well, we don't use it. And the LPP is not even there. Option 10 on Go Lick Pig'em doesn't show you MQ, but somehow you have PTFs applied for it. Yeah, it doesn't make sense, does it? So with your PTF group catch-all number here, stop using it. Only download PTFs for the products that you actually have installed on the system, please. Security slide, break, have a little cup. What does this icon mean? You're 5250. What do you think? To this day, it's the most telltale sign that a customer is not thinking of their IBM in terms of security. This means that your telnet connection is in clear text. It's an open lock, basically saying, "Hey, everything you're sending from client to server is in clear text." It's not good. What you want to see is this little guy here. Your closed lock. It's going to be lit up in green or in yellow, rather. Um, so, how fast does it take you to encrypt your IBM telnet? Literally 10 minutes. If it takes you longer than that, you're not doing it enough. Um, so be sure that when you look at your green screen, okay, and we all use green screen on this call, I'm imagining. When you look at your green screen, just take a look down in the bottom right hand corner of your emulator and see if it's unlocked or locked. If it's unlocked, um, set it up. If you need a hand to set it up, just give us a call. But in reality, this is not difficult to do. It doesn't take long to do. Highly encourage everybody to get familiar with doing that. Please. Thank you. Um, there's a cool thing here, trace internal. It's a great command. There's another one here. This one's a little bit contextually, this is better to talk about first. So when we're talking about your trace encrypted connection info in SST. And I've been talking about this for going on 10 years here now. Look at that old link. I don't think it works anymore, but I'll just talk about it. So, what does it do? Well, if I want to determine on the system how many connections by what protocol, then I can do that with this let macro. All right, I'll go in here and basically set it up connection counts star enable, and it will keep track at a very high level of what protocols are in use. Moreover, it'll also keep track of what ciphers are in use on the system. Why is that important? Well, it's really important if you're going to 7.4 or 7.5 or 7.6 and you're on 7.3 still. um, and to be quite honest, that's the biggest problem we saw with people going to 7.4 and 7.5 was they never checked and determined what things they were actually using from an encryption standpoint. And when they go to 7.5, they realize, oh, IBM has disabled all these ciphers and these particular protocols, so nothing works. Okay, what do we have to do now? Well, if you take a picture of what it was using, all right, and determine, okay, it's using TLSV 1.2 and 1.1, and then you see the 6 ciphers that are in use when you're at 7.3. When you go to 7.5, immediately before you IPL into production, you can go into 7.5 and say, yeah, I'm going to go into SST and I'm going to enable these older protocols and ciphers to allow this thing to function going forward. That's not the ideal way to do it. Ideally, what you want to do is fix that problem before you migrate. When you know this is going to go away, and this is going to go away, and this is going away, let's take care of that now. So when we go to 7.5, we don't have to think about it. Everything's using a new cipher and a TLS 1.2 or 1.3. You can also find out more detailed information about your connections using your trace internal command. If I wanted to go and find out, let's just say I had a bunch of TLS 1.1 connections and I want to determine where they're coming from. Couple of ways to do that. You can do that with a trace internal. Okay. You put trace internal on, you capturing old protocol information, and it's going to say it's coming from 10.10.142. It's coming to your telnet server. Okay, well, that's already two great pieces of information I didn't know before. Like, okay, it's a telnet client. Somebody's probably using an old client. They're not using ACS. So we can identify those clients, switch all those clients over to ACS, and now they can communicate a little bit more modern. Let's see. A couple questions here. Should we keep track of the cipher counter enabled? 30 days, okay. So connection counts in your lick macro here, you can just turn that on. It's going to reset post IPL. Okay. But when you turn it on, there's no real reason to turn it off. I don't have a problem with that. It's just a connection counter, and it's not really going to amount to much. It's going to reset on the next IPL anyway, so no problems with that. Your trace internal, if you want to do it that way, You can set a cap on that. You can roll it off like, hey, I want my trace internal turned on for any older connections, and have it roll over when it reaches 10 meg or something like that. In reality, this is problem solving stuff. You probably don't want to have it on all the time. If you're looking for detailed socket information, right, and you're really looking for solving a problem, it's like auditing socket connections. Do you keep that on all the time? If you have the disk, sure, yeah, it's not a problem. Your journal receivers will be real busy. Um, I think that turning that on to solve a problem is probably ideal, and then turning it off after the fact is appropriate. Protocol enhancements. 7.6 is very similar. TLS 1.3 is the main option. TLS 1.2, same thing for your cipher enhancements. QSEC offer access. Don't give it away. Okay. Every single vendor, us included, everybody says, hey, we need a privileged user profile to do work. Now, the only difference is when we're doing, we're getting on your system, we're going to do something invasive. We're going to do an upgrade. We're going to do, some PTFs. Yeah, you kind of need to have, QSEC offer equivalent to update the system. It's fair. However, if you have a vendor coming in and you bought their spool file management platform, for the lack of a better example, they have a piece of kit. It manages spool files for you. It does some funky stuff with spool files. Great. They need QSEC offer? No, they don't. No. Explain to me exactly why you need QSEC offer, and I'll consider it. But the default answer is no. The default answer has always been yes. You have a vendor coming in or a business partner coming in, they want to do something on the system. It's time to start telling people no. That's been long past the time to start telling people no. Make them justify every bit of authority they require. If they say we need, every special authority, really, what do you need IOSysconfig for? And I can guarantee you, 99 times out of 100, will have zero idea what IOSysconfig actually does. They just don't want to call you when they run into access trouble. So they definitely want all object. They definitely want SecAdmin, and so on and so forth. However, remember one of my first tips, we started talking about user profiles that are set to anything but star public exclude. So change, all, or use. Guess where the majority of those things come from? ISVs. They create their own user profile and they set star public, star all, because they think that actually does something, oh, we need to do this. I've talked to so many vendors about this to say, stop doing this. Or actually, we found your user profile. We want to roll that back to Star Public Exclude. And every single time, almost, they say, well, that user profile needs all object special authority. Well, you're conflating two different things entirely. All object special authority is different than a private authority is Star Public, Star All. Two very, very different things. Okay. It may needs, all object. I would argue against that. But it definitely doesn't need the user profile to be star public, star anything other than exclude. So make sure that you um, keep anybody from the outside who's touching your system on a relatively short leash. Make them justify every access they get. You're still doing FTP in 2026? Stop, please. Use SSH, SFTP. There are other ways to get files transfer around, faster ways to get files moving around your systems than FTP. I'm a big fan of this website, SSL Labs by Qualys. What does this do? Well, if you have an IBM I that has a website, and that website is protected by encryption, and you want to examine your certificate and all the encryption mechanisms that that website supports, this does it. It's cute. You plug in the URL you want to find, it will give you a grade. It will tell you everything. It will do a vulnerability check. It will test um, you know everything from the newest version of Chrome and Firefox and Edge down to IE 5 or something like that, of ridiculous stuff. But it will see, will this work or not? And it gives you an idea of how far back it supports, and say, maybe you want to close this off. Hey, this is, this has a poodle vulnerability. If you want to go back a few years, it will tell you, yeah, this thing is configured well, or it's configured kind of terrible. And it's good to do. Now, if you're saying, well, I have an IBMI with a web server, but it's not on the public internet. We have no NAT rule for it. It's not on, you can't access it from outside the firewall. Okay, great. You can download the SSL Labs tooling and run it internally on your network and point it at your IBMI or any other web server that you have in your environment that's behind closed doors and determine um, a rough grade and a detailed listing of what potential issues you're going to have with that. Encrypting your data. So, when we talk about encryption at 7.6, you now can encrypt your ASP, your system ASP. Before 7.6, the only way you're encrypting the system ASP is if you buy a SAN, external storage. And then you encrypt the SAN, then you install IBMI, you recover IBMI over that. So yeah, you have physical encryption on your disks at that point. At 7.6, you can now, as an internal storage system, maybe you have a bunch of NVMe adapters and one KEC, and you want to encrypt the ASP, you can encrypt the ASP. It's cute. That's not the end of it, though. Okay, when you look at encryption overall, you have tape encryption, you have communications encryption. I would say that both of those are not used nearly enough of what they should be doing. So when you want to start looking at your system from an encryption perspective, you look at the storage, you look at the disk, you look at the communication, you look at the applications. If you have an application that's displaying, I don't know, something in a table to a screen, and um, that information can only be really read if it's decrypted. Um, you know, if you're already on the system and looking and everything is in clear text because you're on the system, that's still not good. So you have to think in terms of layers. If I have a table and that table has a column and that column has social insurance numbers into it, anybody with access to that table can read those social insurance numbers. There are ways to prevent that. You can, get some vendor software that will literally encrypt the data in that particular field, so field level encryption, or you can use the handy dandy thing that IBM invented in 7.3, where you can do roam column access control. It's option 47 in the operating system, where I say I only want this particular column, this field in this table, to be only accessed by our CFO and our controller. All object be damned. I want only those two users to be able to see what's in this particular table. And you can do that. So when you're thinking encryption, let's just say you have somebody do some encryption comms and you're thinking, okay, now we're encrypted. Well, no, you have one thing encrypted and you only did telnet. You have to do a whole bunch more in order to make sure that your system is properly encrypted from start to finish. Bear with me for 1 second here. Q password rules. Steve, why do you keep talking about Q password rules? It came out in 6.1. Not everybody uses it. I would argue very few people still use it. Why? What's wrong with this? It's the perfect system value. It consolidates maybe 15 IBM system values into one. Okay. And a couple of cool things in here. It will give you an option for limiting the profile name in the user profile itself. So if I want to, or sorry, in the user profile's password. So if your password, or sorry, your user ID is B Smith, and then you try to insert the word B Smith into the password somewhere, it's going to say, you're not doing that. It's bad practice to do that. Number one. Number two, you can't stop that unless you're doing an exit point program or you set it up in Q password rules where you're limiting the profile name. So I like that a lot. The other way, or the other little thing you have in Q password rules is a parameter called all create change. What's that do? Well, let's say for instance you put Q password rules into place and limit profile name is in there. All right. So if I do a change password, and it prompts me to say, okay, well, what's your existing password? What's your new password? And in my new password, I put my, S picture. Okay. I'll put S picture 44 as my password and hit enter. It's going to say, S picture's in your name. You can't do that. Well, okay. Well, I'm Cusick offer. All right. or the equivalent of. I'm just going to do a work user profile as an admin. I'm going to roll down to spitcher, put a 2 on that. I'm going to bypass it and make my password spitcher44 because that's what I want to do because I'm stubborn. I'm mule-headed. I don't want to change. So it'll allow me to do that. The all create change ensures that anybody doesn't get to bypass their own rules. So if you're an administrator and you want to go in and do a work user profile or a change user profile or one of the back doors, it will say, no, you're not allowed to do that. So I love those two. It makes everybody play by the same rules. If you're going to enforce user rules, then you should enforce rules on yourself. Actually, you should probably enforce even stronger rules on yourself to make sure that, you know, you set yourself at a higher standard than everybody else as an admin, because a privileged user comes with great responsibility, right? Now, one of the cool things you can do here is you can lock system security values in SST. Now, I'll go back here. I'll say, well, I'm an admin. I have SecAdmin, right? I have all object. And then with a matter of a couple of seconds, I can have every special authority known to man. Now, all 8 of them. Now, to bypass this nonsense, I'm going to go into QPassword rules and take those 2 things out, save it, go back to do a work user profile, set myself up with the password of spitcher for my user ID of spitcher, and then go back and change QPassword rules to lib profile name and I'll create change. So I get past it by literally going in there. Well, you can stop that because you can go into service tools and you can say, hey, I'm only going to allow system value security changes when I say so. So I'm going to lock out anybody going in, security system value changes. So I'm the QSEC offer on the system, and I have 4 people who have all object and SecAdmin. Well, I don't want them getting past the rules. I don't want them even thinking about making a system value change for security because they have no business to do that. They're not prepared. They don't have the wherewithal. They're not trained, whatever. So we're going to come in here and disallow security related system value changes. In order to allow them, you got to come back into SST and flip that flag to say, yeah, I'm going to make a change. I'm going to go from Q security 30 to 40 or something like that. These changes should not be made on a whim. So locking these things in SST is most definitely appropriate. Time check here. 27 minutes. Okay, and I got 47 slides to go. I'll try to pick up the pace. So, quick tip, if you have a service on the system that is not enabled, you can't really exploit it, right? So, when you're looking at your system and determining, hey, how can I harden this a little bit? Look at the traffic. Look at the traffic and the job traffic and the network traffic. When I mentioned auditing socket entries, it's a great thing to do. If I want to trap socket entries or socket auditing for FTP, for instance, I can turn on socket auditing, review my audit journal logs with a little SQL, and say, oh, I have one person who uses the FTP server, period, in the last 30 days. When you go and you talk to that person, they're like, yeah, I transfer something over there every Tuesday. Okay, great. We're going to find you a better way to do it since you're the only one. Get them a better mousetrap. I don't care how you do it. Show them file transfer in, ACS or the integrated file system in ACS, or maybe there's already a file share defined to that particular directory. We're going to give you access to that because we can shut off FTP if you don't do that every Tuesday. So find them a better way to do it. Shut off FTP, and now FTP is one less attack vector on your system that somebody who's trying to do malicious stuff can't even access because it's off. And then change the FTP server to be auto start no, and it won't come back on again. So little things like that. If you're not using RecSec, turn off. You don't want to have remote execution of commands if you don't need to. If you don't have SSH running on your system, you don't have people that want to use SSH on your system, turn it off. Now, SSH is one of those things that's kind of becoming needed a lot more because VS Code uses it and RDI uses it. Developer tools use SSH. So we kind of do need SSH, and SSH is not a bad thing. It just has to be managed appropriately. Otherwise, it can be a little dangerous tool. But if you're not using it, turn it off. Pen testing, I don't care who you use. Make sure they know what the heck they're doing. That's all. Because so many times we talk to other vendors and, or sorry, other customers, and they're like, "Yeah, we did a pen test and they didn't find anything." Really? I'm looking at your screen you're showing me. I can tell you a couple of things right now that we would have a field day with. Um, but just make sure that you're bringing somebody who actually knows what they're doing. Don't hire generalists because generalists um, don't have the expertise to properly break into an IBMI and have a little bit of fun. This one here, find big spool file. It's sad that this is my favorite IBM command. Okay. Um, I digress, and I'm kidding IBM a little bit here. But from all the years, the 30, whatever, 35, 38 years of IBMI, this is the best IBM name command ever because it does exactly what it does. It finds big spool files on your system. Now, you can download and do it, or you can actually use your spool file services. You don't even need to download a utility to do it. Just do a little script to look for your biggest spool files on the system, and then you can tell which ones are the big ones. Reclaiming spool file storage. We see people do this from time to time. Now, you can, yes, adjust the system value. Um, Unless IBM tells you to do so, don't set it to 0 days. They will do that in extreme circumstances, but I wouldn't muck around with the system value. I would use the reclaim spool storage command. It's the safest way to do it in order to get spool file storage back into the system. Um, Upgrading, read your memo to users. There's two books you need to read. So, memory to users and installing, upgrading, or deleted IBM related software for the release that you're going to and any release in the middle. So, if you're at 7.4 going to 7.6, you better read the memo for 7.5 and 7.6 because they are not cumulative. Upgrading is not magic, right? Upgrading is very simple if you follow the rules. If you don't follow the rules and you take shortcuts, um, you see you're going to get yourself in trouble, right? It's like going to 7.4 and 7.5 from 7.3, for instance. And I mentioned that if you're not paying attention to what you're doing from a security perspective, from an encryption perspective, when you go to 7.4 and 7.5, you will find out what IBM is disabled at 7.4 and 7.5 and 7.6. There's no direct upgrade path from 7.3 to 7.6, but um, you get the point, right? If you read the memo to users, or you hire people that read the memo to users to do the upgrade for you, then you should have no trouble. But just be prepared for the changes that you're going to see, because in the end, it is your system, and you want to make sure it's going to run appropriately, and you understand what changes are coming down the pike when you go to the new one. In terms of backup and recovery, pardon me, should you save your spool files? I don't care. Right? You should. You should have a decision on either one. So either you want your spool files backed up or you don't want them backed up. In the IBM commands, you can back up your spool files and it will keep everything, as long as you want. It'll go to tape. Everything's good. However, if you don't want to back them up, just be prepared. They won't be there when we go to recover a system. Um, Storage is relatively cheap nowadays. The value for storage is relatively cheap compared to what it was. So it's not the end of the world. If you want to keep spool files, it's not 1999, and you're thinking, oh God, I got to spend more money on a 2.5 gig drive. It's a little bit different nowadays. So we have a ton of storage, and so I would advise, you know, as long as you have a plan, like check your backups as well, right? Do you have a backup program, a custom backup program, and it's not backing up your spool files, and you've never done a recovery? You might want to investigate that and say, yeah, I want to back up those spool files. Make sure you just know what your backups are doing. Long story short. What about your performance data, your QMPG data and QPFR data, or PRF data rather, and any instances of QPRF data for 7.1, 7.2, 7.3, 7.4? They're all there. If you don't clean them up, people tend to save these things. I disagree. I think they're horrendous to save just because they're huge. Number one, and in reality, in the event of a recovery, In an emergency, do you really care about your performance data on the old system versus the one that you've just got insurance to pay for to bring in, or IBM maintenance to bring in since your building burned down and you've got a new Power 10 or Power 11 system in there? Do you really care about your performance data? No, you won't. You care about your payroll, your EDI, ERP, everything on the system that you need to have. I think performance data is a waste of tape space and a waste of time to back up to tape. That's just me. If you're going from machine to machine in a normal setting with a save 21, restore 21, modified restore 21, sure, keep your performance data. It's going to come over with the save 21 recovery anyway, or the restore 21 recovery anyway. Um, yeah, sure. You want to see, is my Power 11 faster than my Power 9? It will be, but it will definitely show you in the details of your performance data how much better it is. And when you show your boss, you know, your CIO or CFO or president, hey, we got this new machine. Yes, it was expensive, but look at these jobs are running way faster now. Look at the processor. It's way lower than what it was because we have a new faster machine. There's value in keeping it in that instance. On your nightly backups, don't waste your time. Save your access paths. Hell yeah. Save your access paths. Um, Sure, it takes an extra couple of seconds on the backup. On recovery, if you're rebuilding access paths, that's going to take some time. Okay. Um, Now, when are you more under the gun? Right? When you're doing the backup? Nope. When you're doing a recovery and your CFO's in the door knocking, hey, Bill, when's the recovery going to be over? We need to be back up and running. Um, you don't want to be spending time rebuilding access paths on the recovery. Test your recovery, of course. All right. So if you have a backup and you've never tested the backup, how do you know? It's the magical 4 words for anything here. How do you know you're going to have everything? Um, I guess you're just going to have faith. Um, I'd rather have tested, provable evidence of moving things from one system to another. Or, in the case of emergency, can I recover to my cloud? Can I pull data off my remote VTL that I'm replicating from and recovering from the cloud? Um, every part of that process, from the network transmission to the cloud service itself. Or maybe you only have you know, a tenth of the processing power you're paying for in the cloud, and you try to do a DR test, and everything is slow as sin because you don't want to pay for anything more over there in the cloud. Um, you need to know the entire process, um, even if it's just local. Okay, if it's just local, you can do DR tests. You know, there's vendors that do that, and we do that. Many vendors do that and say, hey, take this tape, recover it to your system. And then we want 30 days to have a peek at it to make sure everything is there on that tape. Sure, no problem. Oh, and we're going to find out, when you do something like that, you're going to find out, okay, well, now I know I need license keys for this, this, and this. I didn't think I'd need them. I do need them. So whenever we do need a recovery, there's a procedure that we're going to have to follow and make sure that we can get everything going to where it should be. Ending subsystems before save 21. I tend to. I like that. It makes things go a little faster. 7.4, new option to handle controlling subsystems. Um, I was on the CAC once upon a time, Common America's Advisory Council, and this was one of the ones that we had put together. My old mentor, my mentor, I guess, Pete Masiello. We were talking about, hey, if we're going to do something, save 21, the system automatically starts the controlling subsystem post save. And that's really painful for us because we're doing a save 21, we're about to get down. So we immediately issue an end subsystem star immediate, star all star immediate, and let her rip. So instead of that, let's put a little flag in here on the save 21, 22, and 23 option to start controlling subsystem. Default to star yes, but when we do it, default star no. We don't want it to come back up. We're going to do something fun. End subsystems before power down sys. Yeah, I always do that. Always do that. Why do you ask? Why do you do that? Well, it's because I don't want the power down limit to ever be exceeded. So if I'm starting with the system up and I do a power down sys controlled 120-second delay, whatever, and I try to bring the system down, there's a couple of timers in the system. So if that 120 seconds expires and then the system issues an immediate end, if there's something still hanging after your power down limit, I think it's 10 minutes or something like that by default. Um, when you if the system does not go down past that minute, it's going to issue an end job abnormal on the system and drop everything in an abnormal fashion. When it does that, the IPL is going to be marked as an abnormal IPL and it will come back up as such. Um, that means, thusly, that you will not have any PTFs applied. If you're powering down to do PTFs, they ain't going to be applied in an abnormal IPL. They never do. Or an OS upgrade when you're trying to IPL from an image catalog. It ain't going to happen. You have to ensure you have a normal IPL. So when I do a power down sys, I always end everything, bring it down to a control restricted state at the console, and then I'll issue my power down sys immediate restart. Yes, whatever comes back up every time without fail. BRMS, if you're running non-incremental stuff in BRMS, you want to remove your object details when your tape is reused. People say, well, my BRM libraries are massive. Yeah, because you've overwritten this, you've got the same 10, 20 tapes or something like that, and you've had these tapes for the last 10 years, and you've overwritten them so many times. You're not getting this stuff back, but you have logs of this stuff you're keeping forever. Yeah, no, remove your object details when that tape's reused. There's no need to keep the history log of something you recovered or something you backed up in, 2009. Not ideal. Oh, I went ahead to run your maintenance for BRMS, run your reorgs in BRMS. You want to keep those tables as small as you can. They perform better that way, of course. Don't ignore errors on the system, especially in a backup. So when you have, let's say you do your nightly backup and you're trying to back up stream files, and it says, yeah, we've backed up 1.2 billion stream files and you've got 37 that couldn't be saved. Oh, okay. Well, it's only 37. It can't be that important, huh? Until you find out they are important. So make sure, investigate those things. If they're Apache log directories, omit the log directory for Apache. It's just going to rebuild the Apache log anyways. When the Apache server starts, it's going to say, hey, I got no log. I'm creating a log. And it's going to go on. So omit directories that are giving you problems, if at all possible. Or shut down services that are locking objects, stream files. Back it up and then start the service again. You got to try to make sure that your errors are zero. I like that. Zero is a hell of a lot easier to keep track of versus 37 or 44 or 22. Because only you kind of know. If you're looking at the backups, you see 37 every single night and then it goes to 39. Are you really going to notice? You're really going to pay attention to that? No, I don't think so. So zero is the number. You want zero failures on a backup. Proper tape storage, to this day, I know people that take their tapes home, right? Um, Not ideal from a business perspective because I don't think their insurance will care. If your house burns down, you have all their backup tapes in your house. That's not good for you. That's not good for the business. Just invest in a proper tape chest, tape service. Um, Getting out of the physical tape world into virtual tape is ideal. There's nothing wrong with physical tape. In fact, I love physical tape because you're not going to overwrite physical tape if the tape is offline, right? It's in a safe. It can't be corrupted. Can't be, you have a hell of a job setting it on fire. If it's properly stored in a 3-4 hour tape chest, I'll put that thing in an oil refinery and the oil refinery burns down. Okay, great. It is what it is. Open up the tape chest, you're going to find tapes that actually work. But if you go to virtual tape, just be sure that you always have two, either one, your production replicating your backups to a DR site or a cloud site. You can't have one virtual tape library and those things are electrical. They don't like, power bumps. They don't like water. You know, they can have physical damage, et cetera, et cetera. Make sure you have two of those things. Adequate fire suppression. Yeah, this is real. This one's cute. It's a tarp with a hose in the bottom of it at the lowest point to drain the water out. That's an umbrella. Um, there's one time I had a customer near me. They're actually about an hour's drive from me. I should check on them sometime. They had and I've told this story before, but their room was like an 8 by 8 by 8 box where they kept their servers, and everything is on shelves, no racks. And they had an under the door like a rubber thing that kind of keeps the cold air in the room, and there's water in the server room, for fire suppression. And I never ever did the math. I really should, but I'm curious in terms of gallons per minute stuff coming out of that, fire suppression, the water that's actually gonna come out of that, sprinkler system. How fast will that fill up the bottom of an 8 by 8 room, before it actually reaches the servers that are sitting on the shelves? Who knows? But this has always made me laugh a little bit. Get proper fire suppression, all right? Ensure you have the correct contact information. All right. Change contact info and press F4. Um, see this all the time. Somebody's in here, they retired 6 years ago, but they're still in change contact information. And maybe there's problems with the system. Maybe you have a physical problem with the system. IBM has been called, and they're going to try to reach out to that person. And they don't exist anymore. Their email doesn't exist anymore. Their phone number doesn't exist, or it's their personal cell phone number, and you just called them. They may get to you. Who knows? They have no obligation to get to you. If IBM calls an ex-contractor who's in here, um, they have no obligation to give you a phone call. So just be sure that that's up to date. Check it every 6 months. Doesn't hurt. Your amber attention light. I call this the ambiance light because you walk into a server room, any server room, almost, not every server room. Most server rooms, you're going to pop in there and you're going to see this orange light cast upon the room from a few different servers. Now, if you have an amber light on, deal with it, right? Whether it's on the partition or on the hardware, either way you look at it, it means something's gone sideways. And it might be big, it might not be too big. But you want to make sure that the light is in the default position of off. Okay. On is not appropriate. On means you're ignoring a problem or a potential problem. If I see that light come on, it means that, oh, shoot, now I have to check. And I'm going to check it. I'm going to verify it. If it's a problem, we fix the problem, shut the light off. If the problem's not a real problem, like your, what is it, your display firmware status and your UAK expires or something, your attention light's going to come on. Is that the end of the world? No, no, it's not. But you want to make sure that you get your UAK updated, get your light turned off, and that way, when something real actually happens, that you know it's coming. Asynchronous bring. Do I really care about that? Yeah. Um, it's newer on the save command. Showed up at 7.2. Um, still to this day, people haven't updated their saves. You're saving your stream files. Try async bring star yes. Depending on the architecture of your directories, how they're put together, you might shave 10-20% off your stream file backups. Who knows? Give it a try. Uh, this one is kind of cute, I think. When you have a new system, and say you have two, you know, 2-port NIC adapters, or maybe you have three of them. Who cares? Let's call it two. I have two-port NICs, and I have an HMC, and I'm going to plug in my one IP address. Well, ideally, you should plug in all of them. Why? Maybe your server room isn't that accessible. Um, maybe you want to do link aggregation a little while down the road. Um, you got it there. You're already at the switch. Stake your claim to the switch ports and say, instead of one, I want four. And I'm going to plug them in plus the ASMI cable, because I want, ASMI, I want HMC, I want all of my network cables attached, because I can then do some things potentially in the future, or I can do it right now. IPv6, you don't need it turned off. It's a waste of a stack. Now, unless you're working for, I don't know, a major ISP, and you have a need to reach an unlimited amount of IP addresses or IPv6 addresses, it's extra overhead that you don't necessarily need. I turn it off on Start TCP by default. Exploiting your idle cores. I had this conversation last week with somebody who has a 8-core system, and they're using two for IBMI. Um, and they have Linux in their environment on VMware or whatever. And I'm thinking, you know what? You can really, if you want to, make your Linux go fast, migrate to Power. You have 6 idle cores. You're not doing anything with them. Why not try it over there? Because Linux on Power, I can guarantee will run faster than Linux on Wintel, or sorry, Linux on Intel. A lot of studies. I can't remember who, Gartner or one of the other ones there. You can always look it up, and that claim is there. Don't create a save file in advance. Every piece of IBM documentation for the last 35 years is the same thing for spool or for save files. Create a save file in QGPL. Then, blah, blah, blah. No, don't waste your time. Just when you go into a command line, you transfer a save file, just put save file name.save file into the the fully qualified IFS path, right? qsys.lib/qgpl.live/save file name.save file. And it will push it over there, create the save file, and populate it. Apache server threads, default is 40. Remember that. If you're running Apache on IBM, you want to make sure that when you are trying to scale that server up a little bit, you want to make sure nobody has actually set that Apache to 5 or 3. We see that from time to time. Work link with more info. You can always do a work object with a detail star name, and you'll get on the right-hand side all the information of your stream files versus on the left-hand side, you're going to see them kind of cut off with a type after the fact. I'm a bigger fan of seeing the detail star name. And as you roll down through your directories, it will keep the star prev and show you the full details as you're going down through. 57, got 3 minutes. Work with IFS locks. This is kind of cute. Supported versions, Java, RCAC. I mentioned row and column access control before, just as a reiteration, I suppose. When you upgrade to 7.3 and beyond, one of the first things you should do, especially at 7.3, when you got there, whoever upgraded you to 7.3, if they didn't install option 47, boy, I'd go back and say, why didn't you do that? Load it on your 7.5 or 7.6 system now. That way you can actually control your row and column access. It's called Advanced Data Security for I, which is a terrible IBM name for something. It's row and column access control. And then you can say, hey, I only want this particular column in this table to be accessed by these couple of people or this particular group or whatever. That way you're able to secure your data a little bit better. And it's now 58. I think I may just call it a day. I'm 6 slides open. Open source package management. Yeah, there's not anything else I really want to bang on. Maybe standardize and modernize your DB2. I have like 2-3 slides left. That's it. But this is one that's really important. I talked to somebody there the other day about this in terms of setting up their system. They said that, well, we want to have journal receivers on our tables. We want to be journaling our tables. And I said, well, if you create your tables, and create your schema library and your tables, physical files, with SQL, they will be journaled automatically. There's a whole bunch of things that you can do when you're using SQL/DDL to define and manage your own tables versus the old school physical file, logical file. When you're using proper tables, then you split the index from outside that, and you could do a whole bunch of fun stuff in terms of management, journaling, rollbacks. All that fun stuff is a lot easier to do in SQL compared to old school DDS. Plus, people that have to manage this going forward will be a little bit more accepting of a GUI tool like ACS, where you can go into your tables and manage them in a graphical way rather than say, hey, we're going to do a star PDM. Now we're going to go and check out your DDS source file, and we're going to, boy, that's ugly stuff. When you start managing it within ACS, it becomes a heck of a lot easier, feature rich, and then consumable for, the next 25-year-old you hire, and you try to show them this wonderful thing called IBMI. When you show him something that looks a little bit newer, he's more familiar or she's more familiar in seeing, you're going to get more value out of them. And with that, I'm going to call that a day. Any questions here? I think I got everything in the correct port for nav for I and DCM. Is it static or does it change? Um, when you go to releases, they may alter the ports. So for nav, I think it's 2002 and 2003 clear text and encrypted. For DCM, it's 2006 and 2007, if I remember correctly. Um, if you have an abnormal IPL, do we need to do another IPL ASAP, if not applying or perm applying PTFs? Need? I would say no, you don't need to. Would I like to? Yes. Okay. Um, yeah, I would like that. I would like that. I can't give you a good reason why other than I'd feel more comfortable with it. Okay. I'll try to come back with that a little bit later, Carol. I'll think about that. But in my perspective, if I have an abnormal IPL, if I have the time, can I do a proper IPL and come back up normally? Yeah, I do that. It would make me feel better. I can't quantify that right now, and I can't give you any evidence. It would make me feel better if we did that. Yeah. Okay. I think that's